Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Iran's Revolutionary Guards claim their hypersonic missiles penetrated Israeli defenses. Israel strikes Tehran's missile site, a guards-linked university, a centrifuge production facility, and a weapons manufacturing site. Meanwhile, Donald Trump demands Iran's unconditional surrender and deploys additional U.S. fighter jets to the region. Indian Prime Minister Modi told U.S. President Donald Trump the earlier May ceasefire with Pakistan was through bilateral military talks and not U.S. mediation during a 35-minute G7 call, reported by media citing Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. Russia killed at least 18 people, including an American, in its deadliest airstrike on Kyiv this year, according to reports, while the U.S. condemned it and French President Emmanuel Macron slammed Putin's complete cynicism. Israeli tanks killed at least 59 Palestinians and wounded 221 in Khan Yunis after firing a crowd of gathering for food aid. According to medics, the Israeli military acknowledged firing in the area and said it is investigating this incident. Indonesian police have arrested 3 Australian men for a fatal shooting that killed 2 men at villa in Bali. According to Bali Police Chief Daniel Aditya Jaya, Interpol aided the arrests while 9mm gun and vehicles were seized. Transatlantic airfares have slumped to pre-pandemic levels as Western European travel to the US dropped 4.4%, prompting airlines like Lufthansa and Air France KLM to slash prices amid a 13% fall in July bookings, according to reports. India's aviation regulator DGCA found no major safety concerns in Air India's Boeing 787 after a crash that killed 271 people last week, stating 24 of 33 jets have now undergone safety inspections. U.S. Judge Julia Kubik has blocked President Donald Trump's passport policy nationwide, ruling it likely unconstitutional for denying transgender, non-binary, and intersex people passports that reflect their gender identities, according to reports. Israel's military has said that it struck an Iranian centrifuge production facility and multiple weapons manufacturing sites in the latest round of strikes between the two countries. According to an Israeli army statement, more than 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets carried out a series of airstrikes in the Tehran area. This comes after Israel told residents in a southwestern area of Tehran to evacuate so its Air Force could strike Iranian military installations. The Israel response came after 2 barrages of Iranian missiles were launched towards Israel in the first 2 hours of Wednesday morning as explosions were heard over Tel Aviv, according to the Israeli military. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps also stated that hypersonic missiles were used during the attack towards Israel. Meanwhile, explosions were heard in eastern Tehran, according to reports. Local Iranian media said Israel was attacking a university linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guards in the east of the capital. Reports also indicated that Israel was also attacking the Hojer ballistic missile facility near Tehran, which was also targeted by Israeli airstrikes last October. On the other hand, the first flight bringing Israeli citizens back home after the escalating conflict with Iran shattered international air travel has landed at Ben Gurion Airport outside Tel Aviv. The flight arrived from Larnaca, Cyprus, marking the beginning of a broad repatriation effort as tens of thousands of Israelis remain stranded. This comes as a cruise ship said to be carrying evacuees fleeing Israel arrived in Cyprus after thousands were left stranded by the closure of Israel's airspace. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Yossi Cooper-Wasser is an Israeli intelligence and security expert joining us live from Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Could this sixth day of conflict tip over into direct confrontation between U.S. and Iranian forces, especially in proxy regions like Iraq or Syria?
Well, good morning, good noon. Yes, there is the possibility that this is going to happen. President Trump has dealt with this option last night, and we don't know what was the conclusion of this discussion, but it seems that the president is seriously considering getting the United States directly involved. We have to remember that there is one facility, one major facility of the Iranian nuclear project that needs to be dealt with American capabilities, because they are the only country that has the bomb, the heavy bomb that is necessary in order to hit the Fordow deeply underground enrichment facility of the Iranians, a facility that was built in order to enrich uranium for military grade in the context of a military nuclear project. So that was the case back in 2012 when the Americans developed this bomb specifically for that purpose. And of course, Israel can handle this matter alone as well, but this is going to take a lot of time and effort, and guarantees less adequate results than if we use the bomb that the Americans have. So the United States, since they want to see the Iranians give up their nuclear project, they might consider this option.
And Yossi, from your point of view, seeing that just 2 weeks ago there were protests storming Tel Aviv streets against the current regime of Netanyahu, how unified is Israeli public's opinion behind the current Prime Minister Netanyahu's military campaign, especially after high-profile strikes like the one on Iran's nuclear sites and the killing of General Shadmani? Is there visible dissent within Israel?
Just on the contrary, the Israeli public is totally united in supporting the military effort against the nuclear project of Iran. Even though we suffer here from the Iranian bombardments of missiles, the missile barrages that are coming in our direction, we all understand that compared with what could have happened if the Iranians would have a nuclear weapon, what we suffer is much less painful. And all the people in Israel are supporting the government on this matter, including the leaders of the opposition. They stand behind Netanyahu on this matter as well. So there's no disagreement, no dissent in Israel on the issue of Iran. That said, we are still divided on many other issues, but they are put aside as we fight against Iran.
And building on that same question, what would Israel do if Iran were to strike and target Israeli official, just like Shadmani, that was for Iranian regime?
They tried to kill President Trump. They tried to kill Netanyahu. They keep trying. They're saying that they are trying to hit the government centers in Israel. That's one of their targets when they launch those missiles. So they're definitely trying, and we have to just protect ourselves in a way that would prevent them from doing so. We are not trying to hit political figures in Iran. We didn't try to hit Khamenei, the so-called supreme leader. We didn't try to hit the president, Pezeshkian. We didn't try to hit anybody who is civilian. All the targets we directed our fire to were military people or people who were part of the nuclear project, the scientists of the nuclear project. These were the people we were targeting, including Shadmani, was a sort of chief of staff of one of their forces.
However, from reports we know that citizens were involved in Israel's strikes towards Iran, as well as Iran strikes towards Tel Aviv. There were both reports of casualties from citizens. And from Israel's perspective, do you see the recent Iranian responses as coordinated, or is there evidence of internal rifts among Iran's political and military and citizens in how to proceed? And also knowing that Shah is in exile of Iran.
Well, first of all, we never deliberately target civilians. We never do that. As a matter of fact, what we do is we issue warnings to the population to evacuate areas where we are supposed to carry out an attack, to make sure that they are away of any harm that can happen to them. And that's what we are doing. The Iranians, on the contrary, they launch missiles towards civilian centers, cities. That's what they do, and that's how we got some more than 20 casualties in this campaign of the Iranians against the Israeli cities. None of them was a military person. So that's the situation. Now, I think that what we are going to witness in the coming days is that more pressure is going to be put on the Iranians because of the potential involvement of the Americans, which may lead to some actions of the Iranians against American targets and against other countries in the region. That's what everybody worries about, but there is a need to put an end to this Iranian effort to arm themselves with nuclear weapons, and that's what the President Trump has offered them. Give up the nuclear project, and that would be the end of this operation.
About civilians, that's one point of view, but we also have reports that both sides had casualties. And now moving on to bigger picture, could this conflict shift alliances in the Middle East, for example, pushing Iran closer than now to China or to Russia?
Well, Iran is already very close to China and Russia. I don't know how much closer they can get. But the Chinese and the Russians are very cautious not to get directly involved. I hope this will remain the case, even if the Americans take the strike carry out the strike against the Fordo nuclear facility. And because everybody understands that the Americans won't do that not because they are trigger happy, but because they understand that in order to put an end to the Iranian aspiration to acquire nuclear weapons, you need to destroy this facility. And I think that China and Russia too don't want Iran to become a nuclear power. So that's also in their interest to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. Therefore, I don't think they are going to get directly involved. But the tensions are there, of course. The Iranians enjoy at least political and diplomatic support of both China and Russia.
And with Trump demanding a full end to Iran's nuclear ambition, is there any realistic diplomatic path forward, and how likely is that Iran's leadership will interpret US's statements as a prelude to regime change intentions, and how could they react to Trump's statements?
Well, the Iranians understand that their regime is at risk, because what Israel did, if the United States is going to join in, it's going to be even more so. Exposes their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities, and the opposition in Iran, which is the majority of the people. Most of the people in Iran want to see a regime change. The people may take advantage of this and go to the streets and try to topple the regime. They are very worried about that, and there was a call by the Shah, the son of the Shah, as you mentioned, for the Iranians to topple the regime. So it's a fragile situation for the regime, and it's under a lot of pressure. And Trump keeps giving them the opportunity to accept the deal that he was offered to them before the war started, which means that they would give up the nuclear weapon program in return for lifting or gradual lifting of the sanctions, the economic sanctions over Iran, that would guarantee the regime that it can stay in power. That's the deal that's on the table. The Iranians find it very difficult for them to give up the nuclear project, especially when they are under such pressure, because it's problematic for their image. And but eventually, if this is going to be the only thing that would enable them to save the regime, they might consider that.
And now that we know that Saudi Arabia and UAE and Israel were having a lot of diplomatic meetings and having kind of better relations than previous decades, how might Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE adjust their position as the US hardens its stance against Iran?
Well, first of all, they are worried because they are afraid that the Iranian retaliation to the American operation is going to be directed towards them and to their oil fields and so on. So they are concerned about that. But this is the short-term concern. In the long term, I think they understand that their interest is in weakening the Iranian threat to them and weakening the Iranian regime for that purpose. And they understand that if the United States is going to intervene and everything that Israel has done already contributes to their security in the long run. And once this war is over, I guess there's going to be greater potential to see better relations between Israel and some of these countries, especially Saudi Arabia. Of course, the United Arab Emirates, with which we already have very good relationships. And that's the direction in which the Middle East is going once this operation is over, because it means that the forces that want to promote turbulence, instability, and terrorism are losing, and the forces that want stability and prosperity are winning. And Israel is, of course, the leading force for stability and prosperity. And Saudi Arabia wants to move in this direction too. So I guess we are going to be seeing an improvement of the relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia. There's still the Palestinian issue that stands in between, but I hope we shall find a way to overcome this as well.
Thank you very much, Yossi Cooper-Wasser, for joining us and bringing your expertise to our conversation as an Israeli intelligence and security expert. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky leaves the G7 summit in Canada without a joint statement of support from members or a meeting with US President Donald Trump, who departed early to address the Israel-Iran conflict. A Canadian official stated that the US blocked a strong G7 statement on the war in Ukraine, prompting Canada to drop plans for a unified declaration. The group instead issued a watered-down chair summary, which included support for President Trump's efforts on peace and a call for both Ukraine and Russia to observe an unconditional ceasefire. Despite the lack of a joint G7 stance, leaders apart from Trump expressed support for Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer met President Zelensky at the summit. The two agreed to drive forward the next stage of military support and to convene the next coalition of the willing meeting in the coming weeks. Canada, which holds the G7 presidency this year, announced $2 billion Canadian dollars in new military aid to Ukraine, along with fresh sanctions on Russia. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney also met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the summit. The two agreed to appoint new high commissioners, signaling a thaw in diplomatic ties that had been strained since 2023. Numerous bilaterals were also held on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that France will host the next G7 summit in June 2026 at the Alpine spa town of Evian-les-Bains. Up next, an exclusive interview on India-Canada relations, the Khalistan issue, and more. Megha Sharma, Senior Executive Editor of NewsX World, talks with author and podcaster Kushar Mehra.
Hi, I'm Megha Sharma, and this is day 3, the concluding day of the G7 Leaders Summit. I'm here in Banff, and joining me on for this conversation is Kushal Mehra. He's an author and podcaster, and his podcast is arguably the most popular, most heard Indo-Canadian podcast in the entire country. Thank you, Kushal, for joining me.
Thanks for having me over.
Kushal, of course, it's an important day for India because the Prime Minister is going to be holding a lot of bilaterals, including with the Canadian Prime Minister. There is going to be the G7 Outreach Leaders Summit that takes place as well, which is the focus is energy infrastructure, energy security. How do you view India's role, and has it come of age when it continues to be present at the last 12 of the G7 summits?
Well, as far as India and its position in the global economy and the global polity, if we were to consider, it's a very good position where India is at right now. Already, we are the fourth largest economy in the world. I think we're going to be the third largest in 3 years. So, in those parameters, we're doing well. And honestly, we're just unignorable now. You cannot ignore India. So as far as that is concerned, but from the Canadian perspective, from the Indo-Canadian relationship perspective, I would still rate it in the cautious optimism realm. I think we have all the right signs as far as the signaling from the Canadians is concerned, but we should be very cautious because I've been repeating this line all the time. Things can go south in Canada very soon.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the overtures that have been made by the Prime Minister of Canada, and even when the Foreign Minister Anita Anand was appointed, she made the first phone call to the Indian counterpart, S. Shankar. What does this say about like you said, cautious optimism, but do you think the pragmatism of the current Prime Minister, as is being widely talked about, going to help improve India-Canada ties, whether it is about your diplomatic relations, your political association, and I think more importantly, people-to-people connect, education, talk about trade and investment, that's really important between both countries?
Well, see, it depends on what is your baseline of comparison. If your baseline is Justin Trudeau, then anything is better, right? Because there was literally everything had gone downhill under Justin Trudeau. But I think the fair comparison for India-Canada relation has to be the Prime Minister Harper baseline. That was when Indo-Canadian relations were at their best. Prime Minister Modi had come for a bilateral at that time. So I would say we should, so it's a two-pronged answer. From Justin Trudeau's baseline, things are way better. From Prime Minister Harper's baseline, I think that time was better. So we've not reached that yet. But to be fair to Prime Minister Karni, he's been barely a Prime Minister for a few months, not even like half a year. So let's wait, let's watch. Like I said, we have to be cautiously optimistic on the trade bit. So, the Canadians want to trade. But the point is, my critique of the Indian side has always been this, that they give in too easily to the Canadian side as far as the trade bit is concerned. Our Indian national security concerns dealt with. The Canadians love to talk about foreign interference all the time. But has the Indian side spoken about their national security concerns? I think there has to be a non-negotiable put on the table as far as the trade is concerned, that national security and trade go hand in hand. And I'm pretty sure the Indian side is going to do that. As far as the Canadian side is concerned, obviously they have their own concerns, and I think India should honor those too. But as of now, let's see. We've not reached that stage yet. We were at the best time under Prime Minister Harper. There's a long way to go for that.
You're talking about, Canada continues to harp upon the point of foreign interference with regards to India, whether it is about elections, whether it was about the falseful claim of Nijjar's assassination. The G7 working session that was introduced by Kani also mentioned about how there needs to be the menace of transnational crime and foreign interference that needs to be dealt with. We just saw a report from the CSIS once again talking about India's quote-unquote interference in domestic affairs of Canada. Do you think these talks, these references are not going to go down well when it comes to India-Canada relations and the bilateral that happens with the Prime Minister shortly?
I can't speak for the government of India, but obviously it would be noticed. we're talking about the Globe article that has just dropped in a few minutes ago. But see, I've always struggled as someone who kind of, goes back and forth between India and Canada. When I talk to my Canadian counterparts over here and I ask them, can you give me a working definition of foreign interference? They don't have a working definition. It's like word salad generation. Sometimes this acronym is used, sometimes that acronym is used. So it's very hard to pinpoint what is foreign interference. And it seems if foreign interference is a government having an opinion on the body politic or policies of another government, then you had the former Prime Minister of Canada talking about farm protests in India. I can share at least 6 tweets of Canadian members of parliament, current members of parliament, where they were talking about farm protests in India. We have the Brampton Municipal Corporation officially passing a motion about farm protests in India. Is that not foreign interference? Or if the Canadians do it, it's fine. When the Indians do it, how dare you, sir? It's like that. So there's a lot of inconsistency in this. And what I like about what Prime Minister Carney is doing is he's ignoring all of that. See, you cannot stop what the media is going to talk about. But as far as the Canadian government is concerned, I'm glad they have put these issues on the side burner, because the Canadian economy is not in a good space right now. Out of the OECD nations, they're actually at the bottom of the table in many parameters. And that's not a good sign. And Prime Minister Carney is actually very aware of that, and he's trying to fix that. But this, what I say, the weaponization of foreign interference, it's going to be deftly managed, and I hope both the Canadians and the Indians manage it, because it benefits both the countries, right? Jobs are created on both sides. So I hope this doesn't become an impediment, because one of the biggest reasons India and Canada are not trading. Listen, Canada is a resource-rich country, one of the largest oil reserves in the world, one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. Critical minerals that India needs a lot. Canada has tons of it. We should be talking about that, but we keep talking about this imaginary foreign interference. That's what saddens me as an Indo-Canadian. And my life is so funny because I literally live in both countries. I live 6 months in India, 6 months in Canada. So it's like every time I'm supposed to hold forth for both the sides. Like, मैं किसका case लड़ूं? Do I fight the case for Canada? Do I fight the case for India? It puts me in a very awkward position as a human being. But I have to call it as it is, and it's really unfortunate. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I think Prime Minister Carney might solve this problem.
I do want to raise the issue of the Khalistani menace. And talking about foreign interference, India has been talking to the Canadian government that this is foreign interference because the secessionist movement is detrimental to India's integrity and sovereignty. It directly attracts India's integrity as a sovereign nation. It is also interesting to note that the first statement that came from Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, when he was asked about why has he invited India, particularly in reference to the Niger assassination and the accusations that have been made by the CSIS and the RCMP. And he goes on to say is that India is the most populous country, India is the 4th largest economy, and therefore its stature behooves it to be present at the G7 Leaders Summit. And he particularly spoke about how there is a law enforcement level communication cooperation that is taking place between both the countries with regards to the Niger issue. And again, I do want to focus once again that the election that happened this time, that led to the election of Mark Carney, did not have any sort of influence of the National Democratic Party, which is led by a Khalistani sympathizer, Jagmeet Singh. Do you think that has allowed for the Liberals to focus, perhaps even improve ties between India and Canada, because they're no longer obligated to deal with the NCP?
Canadian politics is slightly different. It's very top-down, leader-driven. So whosoever is the leader of the party, they call the whip. So under Justin Trudeau, whatever Justin wanted happened. So under Mark Carney, whatever Mark wants will happen. It's like that. So NDP is not really a factor. As far as the Khalistani bit is concerned, again, I think the Indian side has to understand the Canadian point of view. Like, we're in Alberta right now. Even Alberta has a statistically irrecognizable, but they also have a secessionist movement in Alberta. We're in Alberta right now. There is a very vocal secessionist movement in Quebec. In fact, the party that believes in it, Bloc Québécois, they actually govern the province. So if you go and tell a Canadian that, hey, why are you talking about this? They're going to be like, we have 2 active provinces that talk about it. We're not going to pay attention. I think what the Indian side needs to talk about, as far as the Canadian side is concerned and Khalistan is concerned, is that Khalistan is not just a secessionist movement. It's a criminal network. There's drug trafficking. There is sexual trafficking of innocent victims. There is crime. There is extortion. Those are the elements, and those elements are harming both India and Canada. So those are the issues I think we failed to raise as an Indian with the Canadian side. You keep crying secessionism. Canada will say, well, we believe in the sovereignty of the Indian state. I can show you multiple statements from all prime ministers. What we need to hammer the Canadians on is, we have given 26 extradition requests to the Canadian side. Why haven't they even been extradited? And the list starts from 2003. Yeah. From 2003. One of the names was Hardeep Singh. Nijjar is not alive anymore. So these are the issues that I think it's a presentation problem. I think the Canadians don't understand how the Indians talk about it, because Canada's neighbor is America. They don't have a national security threat. Yeah. Their mental perception doesn't process. Yeah. Our neighbor is Pakistan, who wants to, obliterate us. So countries that live in hostile neighborhoods and countries that live in docile neighborhoods have a very different way of looking at the reality that life presents to themselves. It's like if you are in a gang-infested ghetto, or if you live in a nice, swanky place. Your perception is very different. And I think we need to understand each other more. Even the Canadians, I'm not saying the Canadians are right. What I'm trying to say is that we're not able to present to the Canadians, and I think Canadians also fail to present to the Indian side that this is what we want from you. Can you explain it in this way? And that's where we are at on the Khalistan issue.
We can't just term the Canadian government to be as naive as to what exactly is happening on their soil for decades together.
Have you seen Canada? They got a Nazi in the parliament. This is not a serious. This is not a serious country. I mean, I don't know how else to say this. They had Jazzy B, the Khalistani, in the BC legislature. Inderjeet Mogga came just a few days ago. So this is Canada. Weird things happen. So I mean, I don't know how else to answer. I know it sounds crazy what I'm saying, but it is Canada. This is. So look at it. I want to give this as an example, maybe, as a parting message. So in an Indian relationship, there is a bada bhai and a chota bhai. Bada bhai is very popular. He gets all the good things in life, and the chota bhai is sitting in the corner. And then the chota bhai breaks a glass. Ki koi meri sune. So Canada is the chota bhai in the America-Canada relationship, right? So now Canada indulges in performative outrage. So Canada is kadi ninda. ये देश सबकी कड़ी निंदा करता है. उसी तरीके से इनको अटेंशन मिलती है. आपको इनको बोलना पड़ेगा उनकी भाषा में. This is what my message to the Indian body politic is. Understand what they're doing. When you understand their essence is performative outrage and acronym generation, look at the number of acronyms Canadians come up with. It's a talent. Everything has an acronym in Canada. They come up with, there are more organizations than people in Canada. So it's a thing. It's a thing. You have to understand the culture. That's how they are. I mean, I'm not justifying it. I'm saying abhi aisa hi hai, kya kare?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much, Kushal, for joining me, talking to me. That has been very insightful. And I hope I can continue to speak to you through the day, because the Prime Minister is going to be holding those bilaterals, and particularly the one with Canada is going to be off. We are going to be watching it with our eyes tightly fixed to it.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a lot of fun, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megha Sharma and Kushal Mehra, for joining us today. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.